Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Roundtable 2024 F1 Predictions. My name is Joe Samaniego. With me, Ben Schneider from Grid, Encore, and LastCar.info, and Jackson Lambros from Outlap Media. Link in the video description to both of their channels. And of course, big thank you to our Patreon subscribers, Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. If you invest in the Grid Network, you'll get some Grid Network stickers in the mail for you, plus a thank you letter. And if you want to do a one-time investment, super chat, buy me a coffee, get on the leaderboard. Jason leads everyone with 2 cups of coffee and 1 super chat. We'll thank you on the air. And if you do $10 or more through super chat or buy me a coffee, you'll get a Grid Network sticker as well. And of course, the easy way to support us, hit the bell icon, subscribe to us. We're getting closer and closer to our goal of 1,000 subscribers. A big thank you to everyone. Gentlemen, let's get started with, I think, what everyone's going to be talking about, potentially as one of the bigger stories, in my opinion, has to be Lewis Hamilton switching over to Ferrari and this being his last year with Mercedes. I think this is going to be a big story all year long. All this discussion, can Lewis get another win? Will Mercedes withhold data from Lewis towards the end of the season? And how will Lewis race around his teammate, George Russell, and future teammate, Charles Leclerc? So, Ben, starting off with you, can this become a running theme for the year and a major storyline each week?
Yeah, I think it will. Obviously, this is the major storyline of the offseason. It's a move that I think very few people, if anyone, saw coming. There have always been rumors that Lewis wanted to race for Ferrari at some point, that it was a dream of his from when he was a child, but nobody ever thought that he would finish his career anywhere other than with the Silver Arrows and Mercedes. And yet it has happened here, or will happen in 2025, but we still have 2024 to go through. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head of similar situations in the past. I don't know that I can think of anything in Formula One and NASCAR. The only things that are coming to mind are when Casey Kane signed for Hendrick in 2012 and had a year at Red Bull that he had to spend in between. In 2011, Kevin Harvick went to SHR in 2014. That deal was announced at the end of 2012, so he had a year at RCR. And then I think Clint Boyer had essentially sacrificed a year of his career at H. Scott Motorsports before he went to SHR in 2017. But can't recall this happening, at least not on this high of a profile for a driver this high profile as Lewis Hamilton in Formula One, at least. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. And as we get later on in the year, I know Lewis has said that he'll honor his team and everything and not try to leak data or share data with Ferrari. But as we get closer to the end of the season, and depending on where they are in the championship, of course, I mean, it's in the title of this stream, for crying out loud. We all expect Max Verstappen to simply run away with the title, but you never know what's going to happen in Formula One. I don't know that very many people expected Max to come out of the gate as strong as he did in 2021 and end up taking the fight to Lewis and even winning the championship. So we'll see what happens. We'll see where Lewis is at this point, or as we get into the heart of the season and towards the end point of the year. But I think it is going to be, at least at the start of the season, fresh on everybody's mind, and a running storyline all throughout the season.
Yeah, Ben nailed it totally on the head there. When you've got a storyline this big, when you've got a driver transfer this big, how do you not make it a storyline week in, week out, right? I think the real big question we need to ask ourselves, though, is how is Ferrari going to be shaping up going into 25, especially when Leclerc is kind of on an off season in 23 and honestly probably had not as strong of a resume as his teammate in Carlos Sainz, who, of course, is now in his final year at Ferrari. I also think the real question we need to ask ourselves is, what kind of form are we expecting Mercedes to be in? Because we can admit they have not been as strong here in this 2022 onward era as they've probably wanted. A win with George Russell, a couple podiums, but you would think that they would be closer to that number 1 or number 2 spot that Ferrari's been in. So I think the big question is, how much are they going to lose with Lewis Hamilton? And as for how much Ferrari is going to gain from that information, I think obviously some things are going to get by Benjo, but I think there's been a great level of legal actions done to make sure not too much of that actually slips through. But super, super excited to see where this unfolds.
It's going to be really interesting to see where that Mercedes is this year and where Lewis Hamilton and the team's performing, because it'll be really interesting if they were contending for wins, maybe close enough to the championship. It's going to be really hard, though, to see if the Mercedes can make up that much ground, but they'll have 24 races to do so. That's an impressive number this year, but we'll see if they get the full counter because we know they've had more races. And then as the season gets going, one or two races drop off. Bahrain will kick off the season, then Saudi Arabia the following weekend. Then, with the way the calendar is structured, Australia, Japan, and China for late night, early morning races for everyone in the American East Coast. So be sure to subscribe because we might have a Grid Life After Dark episode coming up again. And the last time China hosted a race, 2019 before the pandemic. And this is an interesting stat. Shanghai is the one track where Max Verstappen has yet to win. Best finish is third in 2017. That was his only podium at the track. So I got to ask you, let's start this time with Jackson. Could the Chinese Grand Prix catch Red Bull off guard and be a toss-up?
So has Verstappen won here? No. But has Red Bull won here? Yes. Ricardo took a win here 2018. Granted, that is surrounded by a bunch of Mercedes wins. One Rosberg and then Hamilton from 14 on to 19. But I think the real question is, are they going to have a car that's suited for this? And, I think we saw this kind of struggle that they had at Singapore where it wasn't necessarily a mechanical failure or some kind of catastrophe. It was just they did not have a car built to spec for Singapore, and that gave Ferrari the win. So I think the ultimate question is going to be down to, is this going to be a car that is suited for Singapore, or excuse me, Shanghai? And it's hard for me to think it's not, Ben. It's hard for me to think it's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can see you getting Singapore confused, given that was the one race that Red Bull didn't win last year, between Max Verstappen winning almost every race and Checo picking up a couple of his own. And I don't think I think that's one of the few tracks that Max hasn't won at all throughout his career. So it's always kind of been his Achilles heel. But obviously China, is going to be a bit of a wild card because, it's not that we haven't gone there. It's just we haven't gone there in a really long time. And we were supposed to go back a couple of times. And like you were mentioning, Joe, sometimes it's fallen off the calendar. We say we're going to break the record and have 23 races. And then, for unforeseen circumstances, whether it's related to the pandemic or not, because we had the flooding in Imola last year, it always seems like, when you get a calendar this big, one event has had some sort of issue, but it's caused it to fall off the calendar. Hopefully we get all 24 races in this year, although maybe some team members might be thinking otherwise, given how much of a strain it's going to put on the teams. But that's a discussion for another time. In terms of China being something that, could be a wild card that could catch Red Bull off guard here and be an opportunity for the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari, maybe even a McLaren or Aston Martin with how strong they started last season. I think that's absolutely going to level the playing field a little bit. We don't have a ton of data to go back on, certainly not with these new cars that came in 2022 with these regulations. It could be an opportunity for some of those teams to close the gap and maybe make that weekend a little bit more interesting than we're expecting some of the others to be.
And I gotta say, Singapore, the other track where Max Verstappen has yet to win too, that's gonna be really interesting to see. Gonna see what happens. With that said, though, we encourage everyone in the chat room, start sharing your opinions because now we're going to get into our first round of predictions. If you saw our NASCAR roundtable, you're going to see this familiar trend. We're going to go with each person naming one of their top 5 performers in 2024. So I encourage everyone in the chat room start listing off who you think are going to be the top 5 performers in Formula One in 2024. Jackson, looking at you, who you think is going to be one of the drivers to watch?
Gentlemen, welcome to the age of Oscar Piastri. This kid is going to do so much cool stuff this year. You have no idea. And I think you could say the same about Lando Norris, but I've struggled to see someone with so much pace out of the box, especially in unknown territory. Just going back to the kind of performance he had at Suzuka last year is instantly convincing me that this is something special. And if McLaren has built this hot rod that they've promised them, I'm seeing something really, really special from this Aussie.
Yeah, I don't know. Is he an F1 winner? I mean, he won a sprint race. So I don't know how we qualify that, but I certainly agree. But he's got to be on your short list for sure of breakout stars. And people were comparing his rookie season to Lewis Hamilton's. Obviously, not quite that dominant. Lewis came up just 1 point short or 2 points short, I guess. Maybe with tiebreakers in the championship. I don't know how that tiebreaker would have exactly played out, but it was a very tumultuous year with Fernando Alonso. He had that distraction going on. He very well, with how he was driving, could have won the championship his rookie season. Piastri, wasn't quite on that level of Max Verstappen, but he was certainly punching above his weight and performing much better than everybody was anticipating for sure.
Oscar Piastri, I anticipate he's going to have a good season as well. I think that was a great first pick. I'm curious, though, do we anticipate Oscar Piastri to maybe outperform Lando Norris? What do you guys think about that?
I want to say almost strictly 50-50 on results.
Ooh.
I think race pace-wise, Lando is still there, but one lap pace, I think Piastri might have him beaten on some tracks.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Obviously, Norris still has, the upper hand in terms of experience, although Piastri will be going to most of these tracks for a second time now. So that will, I think, help close that gap a little bit. But I tend to agree. I think there's going to be some weekends where, Piastri outperforms Norris, but some weekends where Norris's experience still wins out and he outperforms Piastri. I think it'll be a pretty even split.
All right. So Oscar Piastri, one of the drivers mentioned. Ben, who are you looking at as one of the top 5 performers?
It's really going to shock some people with what I'm about to tell you. So I hope you're sitting down. I hope everybody is, prepared for what I'm about to say. But this Max Verstappen kid looks pretty good. I don't know what it is. I don't know how he's going to do it, but I think he's really going to shock the world. If he performs up to the level that I believe he is capable of, he might just win, 19 races, Joe. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, like it's never been done before, but no, of course, Max Verstappen's going to be one of the top performers. Who am I kidding here? But forgive me for taking the easy one, but you give the top 5. I think we have to at least acknowledge that he's going to be up there. I know we want to get into some of the other strong performers that we're going to have this season as well, but how can you not mention Max Verstappen coming off of the season that he just had in the testing times that Red Bull's shown and what everybody's projections are going to be? I think, we can put Max in the top 1 performer for this year. I think that's a pretty solid and safe prediction.
Yeah, Max, it will be a huge shock if for some reason he does not win one of the first 2 or 3 races. I anticipate he's just going to go out there, sweep the 3. I just don't see how he can be beat. That said,
so yeah. I'm gonna just say this: preseason testing, we usually see some sense of teams being reserved, right, and feeling like we don't know a lot. When on day 1 of testing, you've got Max up a second and a half. As his engineer GP is doing the Mr. Bird's hands evil laugh, like you've got a feeling that it's over. I'm convinced it's not, and we'll get to that later. But it's obvious he's the one to beat.
I think he has to be the one to beat. In the chat room, can't believe in car not adding a race on the calendar to Mexico. Big group of Latino drivers would ensure a huge cars and plenty of promotions through paddle and polo, etc. Lost opportunities. Thank you for this comment, Rod Brown. Of course, IndyCar starting up next week. Formula One, I gotta say, Sergio Perez, I think he had a real down year. I'm really curious to see what he's going to do, but I'm not going to put him on my list as top performers. We went with Piastri. We went with Max. No surprise. I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc. I think this could be a breakout year for him. And I think he's going to have a great year compared to last year. I think some of the bad luck, now the second year with Fred as a team principal, that's I think going to start getting things a little bit better in Ferrari. I know people were talking about the promo video where Ferrari was still struggling with that left front tire, getting that off. But I think this year with Fred, now it's second year, I think we're going to see plenty of improvement at Ferrari.
Yeah, I mean, Leclerc is always another safe bet. Not necessarily in the most recent years, as he's kind of been a guy you've wanted to see succeed, right? Especially if you're a Tifosi, you feel like these guys have kind of put all the pieces together in Maranello for something special to happen with this guy, and we're still kind of waiting for it. And Joe, I think this is a great pick. It's a natural pick, especially as they were the second strongest last week in Bahrain, and Leclerc fastest that final day of testing. So I would totally agree. Probably, if there's one man that can stop Verstappen, it is most likely Charles Leclerc.
They said the same thing about Vettel at Ferrari when Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg were dominating everything. And to Vettel's credit, he did make things interesting for the first part of 2017 and 2018. But I just don't see it happening. You know, I couldn't help but laugh when Nate Saunders of ESPN F1 put out that list comparing the NFL franchises to the Formula One teams. And of course, he correctly selected the Dallas Cowboys for Ferrari. I have a third version of that accident waiting to happen mashup, waiting in the wings, just waiting for Ferrari to mess something up this year. So hopefully that'll be able to drop at some point in 2024. Not that I'm wishing too much ill will on Ferrari, but it is kind of amusing for me as an Eagles fan, especially watching this team continue to resemble the Cowboys year after year, be the most glamorous and historic team and franchise, and yet continue to come up short as the accident waiting to happen. But in all seriousness, I think this is a big year for Leclerc. Obviously, he's going to have Hamilton coming in 2025. He's going to be more determined than ever to win that 8th world title and break Michael Schumacher's record. So, you know, I know that sometimes team orders can be a controversial subject to approach. I don't know if Leclerc would accept playing second fiddle to Lewis Hamilton. I have a hard time picturing that. But I think regardless, he knows that's coming in 2025, and that he's going to be his teammate. And he has to set the bar really high for not just Lewis, but also himself heading into that year by performing well here in 2024.
2024. So we got on the board Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, and Charles Leclerc. Jackson, who is your fourth driver you think is going to be a standout top 5 performer?
Joe, let's talk about the other side of this Ferrari garage this year, because let's talk about a guy who is now is able to act like he doesn't necessarily have nothing to lose, but he's definitely he's got nothing he can save. And he's got this mentality of, yes, it's been awesome to be at Ferrari and to be a part of this team. Fred V has been so nice to me, but maybe if I know I'm not coming back, I can be a little bit rougher on the cars and on the people. And maybe if I get team orders, maybe I can act like I'm not really hearing it. I'm really, really anticipating that this is a year where, as he's going out from Ferrari, Sainz really, really proves himself as a top free agent coming into this silly season.
That could be fireworks with Sainz, and we've seen at times Sainz be the faster Ferrari up front. Oh boy, team orders. And Sainz is a good driver. The number of times he told Ferrari, no, that's a horrible idea. Let's do this, and gets it done.
Yeah, you know, again, it's a big year for Carlos Sainz. At least he's been given a year to solidify his future and come up with an exit strategy for 2025 when Lewis Hamilton takes that seat. But I imagine it couldn't have been a good feeling to. I mean, obviously Lewis Hamilton's one of the all-time greats, but for a driver that has had a little bit of success at Ferrari, the only non-Red Bull driver to even so much as win a race last year, I've got a feeling that he will find a home somewhere, and whether that's a direct ride swap at Mercedes, who knows who Mercedes is going to draft into that seat, and who's going to be rumored there. I have no doubt that whether it's an F1 or otherwise, Carlos Sainz will land on his feet and be in a competitive seat somewhere in 25.
Ben, final of the top 5 drivers, who are you naming?
Well, I want to be a biased homer here and say Logan Sargent's going to take a step forward and improve, but I'm looking more so at his teammate here. And let me just follow up on that real quick. I do think Sargent's going to take a step forward, but I don't think he's going to outperform the other driver in that Williams. I think Alex Albon was incredibly impressive last season. I don't know if the Williams is going to be a car that is solidly in the midfield that can maybe compete for a podium here or there, like some of the other midfield teams. Like how many podiums did Aston Martin have last year with Fernando Alonso? Alpine can maybe flex their muscles here or there as well. I don't know that Williams is quite at that level yet. I still think they're probably going to be solidly 7th in the constructors. But I think the reason that they're going to be that high is because of the work that Alex Albon has put in. I think, it's obviously unfortunate what happened over Red Bull. That program is absolutely ruthless, and sometimes they have more talent than available seats and maybe give up on their drivers too quickly. But Alex Albon did a great job for Williams last year. I expect more of the same, if not even a little bit more in 2024.
I like that. Alex Albon, I think he could have a breakout year. I think that Williams could turn some heads. What do you think, Jackson?
Yeah, I love this pick. This was another guy on my list of guys who just not only could have a pop-up year, but are going to be I think a top contender for that open Hamilton seat. I think going all the way back to Australia 22, this is a guy that can make any stint work. He's not necessarily a guy that is outright great on pace, although he can totally do that if you ask him to. But he's a guy that is able to kind of make any strategy work and can really get distance out of tires and can make fuel numbers and can do so in a competitive way. And I think that's one of his most special traits. And in the funky world of Mercedes strategies where Ferrari just kind of, where Ferrari just kind of does kind of clown stuff, we see some, I could see this as a fantastic strategy pairing for what Mercedes might be cooking.
I'm really excited to see what happens with the top 5 performers and how they all turn out. Rod Brown with Norris, Alonso, Sainz, Leclerc, Verstappen. I feel Alonso's been a little bit on the quiet side during this offseason. Any thoughts on Alonso?
We didn't bring him up, and yes, he's getting up there on age, but I still think this guy's going to have a great season. I'm really hoping for at least a podium from him or Stroll. But yeah, I think we're going to see very much of the same Alonso we saw last year is my theory.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I've been thoroughly convinced. I did not see Fernando Alonso's strong start to 23 coming. I went on the record saying that, I think he would be more suited for IndyCar at this point, because he is getting up there in age, and he, at one time at least had the Triple Crown very high on his bucket list. I don't know. I would think if it was still that high, he'd probably be racing in IndyCar right now. But the reality is he's over in Formula One, and he's certainly made the most of the opportunity that Aston Martin have given him. And I think that he's still the clear number 1 driver over there. Even Lance Stroll has pulled out a couple of podiums in his career, so I wouldn't be totally blindsided or taken by shock if he were to do it again, especially if Aston Martin can give them a more competitive car similar to what Alonso was doing at the start of 2023. But as for Alonso in particular, I'd be a little surprised if we don't see at least 1 or 2 podiums out of him in 2024. And who knows, maybe we even see him break a new record for most number of starts, or certainly the most number of days. I know he took a sabbatical for a couple of years, but I think would break Kimi's record for most time between wins in terms of starts as well.
Would love to see it.
That'll be huge if he does that. If he gets a win, add him in the chat. Might race winners for 2024. Verstappen, Hamilton, Piastri, Leclerc, and Alonso. Interesting. Norris is not on that list. It's going to be really interesting to see. And Rod saying RB might be the big improver. I'm thinking they meant Racing Bulls, the Visa, Cash App.
The Cash App RB.
V-Carb.
Yeah.
V-Carb. Oh, V-Carb. That's going to be something else. I definitely think Red Bull, well, if they improved more, we're in trouble this year.
It's over.
It'll be over. So one of the big things I think we're going to see, Max Verstappen, the clear championship favorite. Without a doubt, I think he's going to be the one to beat. Testing, we saw how that was. That was a clear sign that everyone's going to be chasing him. But Singapore last year, as we talked about, that was the one race where he had problems and no podium. Even with the uncertainty going on right now, Christian Horner, which we are following that news story, any update, any confirmation, it'll be on grid tonight. Even if he was hypothetically to be out of the picture, I still think Red Bull is going to be up front. I'll be shocked if they just suddenly are not. But I got to ask, 24 races, how many will Max win? How many podiums? And which race, if any, doesn't he get a podium?
Well, Joe, to your point, and not to make light of the situation too much, because there are some pretty serious allegations, and if they are found to be true, then I believe Horner should step aside at the very least, or if he's not fired outright. And of course, we'll be following that situation. But speaking of the team principal, any one of us on the screen could have been the team principal for Red Bull last year. They still would have won the championship. I mean, when you have a car that dominant, when you have a driver that dominant as Max Verstappen is, I don't know that it's going to make too much of a difference one way or another. All the uncertainty going on behind the scenes is certainly not pleasant to deal with or talk about. And I wish that, I think even Ford, their future partner, has come out and said, we wish that, maybe you would, get a move on things and wrap this investigation up and at least make a decision one way or the other so that it's not looming over us at the start of the season. But regardless, let's look ahead to 2024, and Max Verstappen individually and Red Bull as a team. Even Sergio Perez won a couple of races last year. I mean, the way last season went, the way they look in preseason testing, 20 wins out of a 24. I mean, I know that raises some eyebrows and it might sound a little ambitious, but I mean, the guy won 19 last year, and Checo's pace, I mean, he won those 2 races that he won were at the very beginning of the season. So, once we got into the heart of the season here, Max Verstappen was simply unstoppable. I see no reason to believe that he won't be that unstoppable again. And if he's not, 20 of 24 is still a lower percentage than 19 of 22. If anything, that's a conservative prediction here.
I'm going to take the hopium-filled route here, while agreeing with you that Adrian Newey is the true GOAT of this team right now and has really is the real reason, one of the real reasons why this team has been able to make so much happen. I want to talk about this new design because it is bold. It is very, very unique, where we've seen so many teams kind of go back to this 2022 philosophy of design. I'm going to argue that we either find out that it's doing something that it shouldn't be allowed to, whether it's a blown diffuser type scenario or the Mercedes moving steering wheel that changed the caster. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but something like that. I think there's going to be some Achilles heel to this car, one way or another. And I'm going to say, I'm going to do an even 14 races, 8 more where he podiums.
Wow, 14, 8. It's going to be really interesting. I'm thinking Verstappen, I'm going to go 21 wins and 2 races. He's not going to podium, just 2. Singapore, I just got an idea that could be, I mean, we've seen how chaotic that race could be. And then I'm going to predict he won't get a podium at a track where we've seen it get crazy before. Azerbaijan, Baku, street course. The last couple times we went there, it wasn't exactly the most exciting, but we know that track has been a reputation of being a wild card. We've seen Max Verstappen crash out of that. I got an idea that could be a wild race again. Be really interesting to see what happens. In the chat room, Rod, Sonoda, and Ricardo, a good pairing, might pinch points in the midfield. That's going to be really interesting. They don't need Horner or the controversy. Laughing at some point, I think, with some of our predictions. And then a question from Kobe in the chat room. Could Alonso be a short-term option for Mercedes until Andreas Kimi Antonelli is ready?
I love everything about this theory, and I want this to happen, and this is the optimal future. Alonso brings his expertise. He's a solid number 2 driver to complement Russell. We see him out in Mercedes equipment, and then Kimi Antonelli, who's sliced bread apparently, is in to go fill in for that seat. So I love everything about that, Cub.
Yeah, first of all, Jackson, DAS for dual access steering. That was, I think,
Thank you
for the Mercedes there. I think Alonso is certainly on the short list. I think we mentioned that on our breaking news special when the news was first announced. Who might Mercedes look at? But again, Jackson, you say a good number 2 for Russell. The way Alonso's driving right now, even though he's going to be in his mid-40s, I don't know if that's a role that he's necessarily going to accept, at least at the start of the year. I know George Russell has a lot of potential and, is an F1 race winner now as well, Brazil in 2022. But I think that would be a very interesting dynamic to see play out. And how ironic would it be that Fernando Alonso's career continues to be linked with Lewis Hamilton in some way? He's the one that would replace him as he departs for Ferrari. That would be very interesting.
I don't think Alonso would want it any other way, Ben.
Alonso, Hamilton, they go way back.
Yep.
Joe, just and one more point to follow up on before we move on. I agree with you. I think that he's not going to podium every race. I think that he will fail to be on the podium for one race this year, but it's not going to be Singapore. I think at some point there's going to be some sort of accident or reliability engine failure that is not of his own doing that takes him out, and he'll retire from one race this year. But in terms of Singapore, I think that I don't know if he's going to win it, but I think he'll at least recover enough to finish on the podium and be a little bit stronger than they were in 23.
And that's the big thing. After what we saw in 2023, I feel if he goes out there, gets a ridiculous high number of wins, it's very possible. We're not talking about something crazy like IndyCar where there's no way somebody's going to win more than 7 races over in that series. It's way too competitive. Yeah, Red Bull, Max Verstappen, they're going to be in the front. But now let's go to the back of the field. Last year, Haas, the American F1 team that F1 says is good enough to be on the grid compared to other teams, they have a new team principal. Gunther Steiner's out. They have the same drivers, though. So not a whole lot of changes. Testing, I didn't think we saw a whole lot out of them. Gotta start with you, Ben. Could this be a make or break year for Haas F1 as it appears they're not really going anywhere?
It's not a make or break year because the team's already broken. I mean, that's where Haas is right now. I mean, you can't make it up. And this was what was so frustrating to me, Joe. You brought up the point of the team that F1 says is good enough to be on the grid while we can't get Andretti. Toto Wolff and Christian Horner being opposed to Andretti, whatever. Those guys have earned the right to speak their minds and have their opinions on things going on in this sport. Gunther Steiner was in the exact position that Andretti Global is currently in just 10 years ago. He was trying to be not just the 11th team, the 12th team, because Caterham was still racing in 2014. And then they went into administration. Haas ended up coming in 2016 as the 11th team. They should have been the 12th team if Caterham had been able to survive. And then Manor goes away. Now we have 10 teams again. And for some reason, Gunther Steiner is so opposed to an 11th team coming on the grid. I'm not going to get over that. I know Gunther's gone from Haas now at this point, but it was utterly embarrassing and ridiculous to me that he was so staunchly opposed, one of the many that was so staunchly opposed to Andretti coming in, when he was the guy that was trying to lead the American team onto the grid as the 11th team himself not so long ago. It's just absolutely ridiculous to me. But in terms of Haas, I think Will Buxton put it perfectly. Full disclosure, I haven't watched Drive to Survive since season 2, but I saw the memes come up this week. He was right on the money. It's not like they're bringing a knife to a gunfight. They're bringing a spoon to a gunfight. That's where Haas are right now. That's where Haas have been trending ever since the Rich Energy debacle. It's just been all downhill from here. And it's a shame because they came out and were solidly in the midfield by 2018, their 3rd year in existence. If things had gone a little bit differently, I think they could have been the best of the rest and finished 4th in the constructors. But, the team is just an absolute shambles right now. And I'm going to put I know we were supposed to maybe save the bold predictions for the end of the show. I'm going to put my chips on the table here. Haas are going to be the only team that do not score a single point the entire year. That's my prediction.
Oh.
How do I follow this up, Joe? Let's start with this. I think we got to give Komatsu the benefit of the doubt here because he's been thrown in a very difficult position of being handed the keys to this sinking ship. Steiner ship, pun kind of intended there. But I think that, again, going off of what Ben said, this is a team that has had so much highlights in its almost a decade-long career now. How weird is that to say? But we really have seen this team in this kind of new big boy era kind of run itself into the grid, into the tail end of the grid, I should say. And I think there does need to be a serious change of how things are ran internally and how they're really approaching how we run this thing. If there's going to be any hope of getting this thing towards the sharp end of the field, I really don't think they're going to be alone in that. I think we'll talk about this more later, but if Alpine apparently is refusing to put any decals on their car because it's going to slow them down 300ths of a second, according to Ted Williams. That's proof that you maybe don't have a fast race car in your hands. So I think they're not going to be alone in that. But it's going to be a miracle if these guys can get higher than 7th in the constructors.
They're a mess. Haas, I just little confidence in that team to perform. I just do not see them going anywhere. But you bring up Alpine, and Alpine, I've got a feeling they're not going to be doing that great this year. I'll save that because we're going to get to our second round of predictions, and we encourage everyone in the chat room. We're going to go with each of our top 3 that will struggle in 2024. Jackson, who you're putting on the list first?
Sergio Perez, your time has unfortunately ran out. The Church of Helmut Marko has appreciated your patronage. However, I think it is time to understand that maybe you've overstayed your welcome here a little bit, and that we're looking for young talent. And we've had this Kiwi guy waiting in the wings for a while to go somewhere. And it just kind of makes so much more sense to have him where you're sitting right now. No hard feelings. You're probably going to find another team around here. And if not, there's going to be like 10 guys in IndyCar wanting you. So do the best you can this year. Off year for checkout, guys.
How would you like to finish second in the Drivers' Championship, be in the best car, and be one of the top predictions for one of those that's going to struggle in 2024, and for the prediction to probably not be that off base? What a wild situation to find yourself in. But, Jax, as crazy as it sounds, I don't entirely disagree. I almost put Checo in my top 5 to watch out for by default, just because I think the Red Bull is so far ahead of everybody else that it wouldn't surprise me if they take 1-2 in the drivers again. I think they're going to run away with the constructors. Max is obviously going to run away with the Drivers' Championship. But, I don't think, and again, Helmut Marko is terrible in many ways. I don't think that him coming out and saying Checo has woken up from his world championship dream, and that's why he's been pushing himself over the limit and struggling and everything. I don't think that was the smart thing to say out loud. But I also don't think Checo can take the fight to Max and be a world championship contender in equal machinery. So, is he in the top 3 that I think are going to struggle? I don't know that I put him that high or that low, I guess, on the list, however you want to look at it. But I do think that it's going to be the future of Checo Perez is going to be very interesting, because I don't think that future is going to be at Milton Keynes with Red Bull.
I think he's going to have an average season, which for Red Bull, that's not good enough when you have other drivers coming in. I think he's going to probably be down to his last year with Red Bull. It's a good tenure, and I got to be honest, this is sort of crossing paths a little bit between series, but if you're Sergio Perez and your time might be up in F1, and there's another American-based series that's looking at a race in Mexico City, could there be a deal to have him for a one race? Be interesting to see what happens. Ben, who are you going to go for one of your predictions for someone that's going to struggle in 2024?
Well, first of all, I don't even know which series you're talking about, if it's IndyCar or NASCAR, because I heard, I went out to lunch today and I heard on Sirius XM that Jordan Bianchi's saying that Mexico rumor for NASCAR is maybe gaining some steam for the Clash year. So, who knows what's going to happen on that front. I think Checo would be certainly welcomed here in America, no matter what his future may hold. Certainly, I think there could be a good opportunity for him in IndyCar. We just talked about the team, and again, nothing against the driver or anything like that, but he continues to extend that record for most starts in Formula One history without a podium, and I certainly don't think that streak is going to come to an end this year. I hope he goes out and proves me wrong. I hope he can at least pick up a couple of solid points finishes and get the most out of the most that he can out of that Haas. But I got to say, Nico Hülkenberg, I expect him to pretty much just be a footnote for much of a year. And I do think if you have to look at the inter-team battle, Kevin Magnussen has been a part of the Haas family for many, many years at this point. I think that he's probably going to be the number one driver and the most likely to be able to drag that car into the points a couple of times this year. Hopefully Hülkenberg can do the same, but I'm not necessarily expecting it.
Yeah, Ben, I like that pick, because for me, I think I could see it as going either we see this guy really, really pop off in this Haas, or we truly know by halfway through that this is going to be his last season in F1. And I think we're at the point now where maybe Haas starts asking themselves, if we're really struggling for pace right now, why are we going with 2 veterans, and why don't we try getting some young guns in this seat? And I think that's probably a change we could see for 2025. So,
well, Jackson, they tried that in 2021 and they had their worst season ever. So now, granted, one of them was Nikita Mazepin, but I mean, I don't think the last time they dumped 2 veterans for 2 rookies, it did not go very well. So I think you still need at least, whether it's Magnussen or Hülkenberg, I think you still need at least one driver like that to pair with a young rookie, maybe somebody in the Ferrari driver academy, and then you can see where that goes from there.
I would agree with that. And also I'd say the class of 2021 for Formula 2 and the junior talent there was very, very, very different than the kind of guys we're talking about in F2 right now. But I digress.
One driver I'm looking at, and it sort of leads into this comment where Adam says Haas will be at the bottom of F1 team champion, and Sauber, Kick Sauber or Steak Sauber, whatever their name, Guan Yu Zhou, I think he's going to be one of the drivers that's going to struggle this year. I just don't think he's going to be improving much. And considering what that team is going to be changing to, I think this might be his last year in F1. He's going to finally get to race in his home country. But we know the money, the sponsorship that you bring to the team could only go so far. I think that he's going to be saying goodbye to F1, and we're going to see somebody else in that car next year.
Yeah, well, I just looked up his stats to remind myself. His first year in 2022, he was 18th in the championship with 6 points. In 2023, last year, he was 18th in the championship with 6 points. So, it's basic mathematics there. He's actually been a bottom 3 driver, at least a full time. I know we've had a couple of situations where we've had fill-ins, and obviously the whole situation last year with Nick DeVries getting dropped and Daniel Ricciardo coming back in. But in terms of, there being 20 seats on the grid, you're 18th. That's taking up a bottom 3 spot. So, if you want to talk about the top 3 drivers that might struggle, I know that Steak, Kick, Sauber, whatever the heck they're called, are certainly hoping that partnership breathes some new life into that team. But again, I think it's a similar situation to what we were just talking about with Haas and me thinking that Magnussen would be the driver to watch if anybody at that team. We talked on the breaking news show, and Josh about lost his mind when I suggested this, but Valtteri Bottas has been posting some cryptic images about maybe a return to Brackley and maybe having Toto Wolff's number on speed dial and being a contender, a dark horse contender for that seat at Mercedes here. I think he's got, even if that's not an option, he's still going to be out to prove a lot of his doubters wrong, as he always is. And he's still somebody who I think on his best day can be one of the best that this sport has to offer. So I would expect him to be the solid number 1 driver over Zhou Guanyu, no matter how, if you want to talk about him being a bottom 3 or a top 3 driver that might struggle, Bottas is still the clear number 1 over there in my mind.
Like that opinion, Ben. Just love this pick overall, Joe. As much as I want to see this guy succeed, as much as, especially when he's now finally going to be, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he's going to be the first ever Chinese driver to start in his home Grand Prix. And I really, really do hope we see something special there. But I mean, 6 points finishes over 2 seasons in what's been about a mid-pack car. And again, it's going to be hard to compete with a guy like Bottas, but we haven't seen that gap necessarily close here between 21 and 22. So I do really, really think this is a make or break year for him. And I think this is a year where Sauber, again, we could see Bottas moving. And I think Sauber's really got to ask themselves with Theo Pourchaire waiting in the wings, what do we want to do with our guys? And do we want to start fresh here for 25? So,
and Jackson, you are right. Zhou Guanyu is the first ever F1 driver from China, period. So, and obviously he hasn't gotten a chance to run his home Grand Prix because we haven't had that race for the last 4 years now. So he will be the first Chinese driver to run the Chinese Grand Prix. That is correct.
Yeah. It's disappointing because from when he was with Renault and the driver development coming up, I thought, hey, he's talented. He's going to be, but it's just one of those deals with Renault. There's no place to go as the seats were taken. put a lot of effort to get into Sauber. It's just not materializing. I think it's just really unfortunate. Be interesting if he maybe tries IndyCar. That could be really interesting to see what he does. He has a lot of sponsorship. All right, Jax, I know you mentioned your first picks. Who else? Your other two drivers or teams? We'll throw that in there. Do you see struggling?
Again, I've already mentioned it, but I think Alpine is already struggling. We're seeing early signs of bad season when you're having a car that's openly bare, and you've got their garage, according to Ted Kravitz during testing, saying that a whole sheet of stickers is giving them a third of a lap, a third of a second a lap, and I think unfortunately they are the sole individuals with the Renault powertrain, which has been consistently one of the weaker powertrains, especially in reliability. I struggle to see these guys improving over last year, 100%. Sixth at best for them.
Totally agree. And yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's where we ended up last year, actually. So I certainly don't see them taking a step forward if these reports are true. So I think that, they're certainly going to be ones that you have to look at and unfortunately think are probably going to be struggling as well.
Alpine, I see, is nowhere going to be up towards the front. Ben, who are you looking at for your other two struggling?
Well, I mean, again, the easy answer would be Magnussen, just simply because he's in the Haas. But I've cheated enough already. I've said Verstappen for drivers that are going to succeed and be among the top. I'm trying to think of another one here. I've never met the guy. Maybe he's a very nice guy in person. I've never been convinced that Lance Stroll's heart has entirely been in it. And I think, it's obviously, I wouldn't wish his situation on anyone because I know that he's, primed to be the butt of all jokes, especially when his dad is, so heavily involved with the ownership and the team and everything that he's driving for. But I think especially when you have Fernando Alonso as your teammate, I'm not expecting too much from Lance Stroll this year. Now, I would love to be proven wrong. I'd love for him to go out there and enjoy a podium or two, but I just don't see it happening.
I see Lance Stroll's time in F1 finishing up as well too, especially with Aston Martin, their hybrid car program coming up in sports car racing. That could be an easy segue to, well, I've done my time in F1, go to sports car and open that seat up to somebody else a lot more deserving. That was going to be one of my picks. Another person I'm predicting that's going to be struggling this year just because we've seen a little bit of promise, but I just don't think we're going to see a whole lot. And I think it's going to get a lot of people surprised. I think Yuki Tsunoda is not going to have a good year. I think he's going to be mid-pack back, and I just think he's going to be in trouble.
I really want to disagree with that because I think he had a unlucky but fairly promising season last year. I think obviously it's hard when Liam Lawson follows up that act, and we haven't seen a good apples to apples season comparing him with anyone else in equal machinery. But I think this is going to be a very telling season for sure.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I want to disagree. I'm reminded of, he had a strong run to close the year at Abu Dhabi, even leading some laps. I know that was, because he was off sequence or whatever, but he also finished fourth at Abu Dhabi in 2021. Surely that was the most notable thing that happened in that race, right? That appears to be a strong track for him. I think that he does have some circuits that play to his strengths a little bit. We'll see. I would like to see him continue to improve and take a step forward here. But, when you have a very experienced teammate, in Daniel Ricciardo, who's, got a lot to prove himself coming back this year. Again, as much as I want to disagree, I can certainly see, Joe, where you're coming from. And I think that that's, unfortunately for Yuki, a very strong pick here.
Yeah. I mean, Yuki, he has some highs, but it just seems the lows are not that great. Now that Daniel Ricciardo is going to be in that car full time, I think Daniel Ricciardo is going to get up to speed, considering what that car is going to be, I think you're going to see Ricardo consistently towards the front ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, and I think that's where it's going to start factoring in and the bad luck. Yuki did say a comment, I think, in testing that he has worked out a lot, so we could see an improvement, but I just think he's going to be one of my drivers that I anticipate is going to be struggling. Now, I know a lot of fans, there are some races where they're really excited about, and then there's some races where they just struggle keeping engaged. For some fans, those races are right here in the United States, and of course, there's 3 of them right here again: Miami, Circuit South America, and Las Vegas. So, Ben, starting with you, what order do you have the races from most exciting to least exciting here in the United States?
Take the order you just listed them off, and just put Miami from the front to the back, and that's my prediction here. I still like COTA, as a natural, actual road course and track. Las Vegas, I know, was exciting last year, but street circuits can always be kind of hit or miss, and again, certainly not going to have nearly as much hype and anticipation and as much of a wild card factor going into this year. So I would think that Max Verstappen is probably more looking forward to that this year in terms of performance and everything. And Miami, I don't know. I mean, I'm saying this as an American that's passionate about wanting the sport to do well here. Maybe not quite as passionate as I was this time last year, given what's going on with not letting Andretti in. But I'm still not going to wish ill will upon the sport's success here, and specifically Miami as well. That I hope that everybody that's a part of that event and that group can have a good race for them and for their sake. But I don't think I know America's a pretty big country with, several big markets, but I don't think we need 3 races in this country. And if you had to pick one race that had to go, I think Miami is easily the one that's highest on everybody's list.
I would totally agree with that there, Ben. Vibe wise, you try and feeling like something immaculate there, but actual racing product has not been stellar. And why would it? You're doing a Caesar's Palace parking lot conversion basically, and the first sector is great, but the second sector you're kind of forced to almost conga line under the highway until this big long straightaway all the way back to the start finish. And it's an interesting layout. It doesn't generate great racing. So Miami in last for me as well. Vegas, where do I see you going? Do we rubber in somehow more than last year? I don't think so. Maybe we hope for slightly warmer weather and things change there. I struggle to imagine a similar. It will be jackpot for Vegas if they're able to get the exact same kind of racing product that they got last year. And again, let's remind ourselves, they got very lucky considering how behind they were for preparation for that. So we did not forget you, Vegas. We're still watching you. You're cool for now, but if we still see mess ups like this, it's over.
Well, they'll get more rubber in this year, Jackson, because they had FP1 was 8 minutes last year. So assuming that they've learned their lesson from that, and they can actually get a full practice session in, or a full FP1 in at least, we'll have more rubber in by default there.
And I say that, but you really aren't rubbering a track in that much if you're not having support series or, of course, longer sessions. And you guys can. I don't think there was any support series this year, and I don't think that's intended to change. Miami at least had Super Cup and W Series for a couple, as well as some other things. But yeah, I see Vegas as second, and I'm with Ben. I think COTA is a consistent, decent race, if anything. And again, it's a track that is naturally facilitating some pretty decent races. What instantly sticks out in my mind is obviously Hamilton seizing his title there in 2015. Kimi with a last lap pass with Verstappen, or excuse me, the other way around there. In I want to say that was 2018, 2017, and of course, most recently Kimi's last win there. So great memories there, great track. I expect a really good product there this year.
I think COTA, that's going to be on top of my list for race. I think I'm more excited about, and it's going to have the most exciting one. Vegas, it could be up there, but last year, brand new track. It'll be really interesting now that everyone has notes, especially Red Bull. They could just pull away and just make it where we're all talking about what's happening behind him. And then Miami, I think it's more just to hit the market, get those fans, those VIPs, say we're racing Miami. But I think they could really look into a proper street track or something, because it's not cutting it. Hopefully they use real water instead of the fake water for the boats too, as well. I mean, that was something else. But that one team we talked briefly about, McLaren. Oscar Piastri was on our list for drivers that's going to be up there. Last year they had a slow start to the year. Ben, there's a lot of hype about McLaren this year. Do you anticipate them to start off fast compared to what happened last year?
Yeah, they better start out fast, because you look at where McLaren have ended their seasons the last couple of years. We talk all the time about the big three, right? Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari. It wasn't that long ago, really, that McLaren was a perennial championship contender in this sport. And then Mercedes came along with their own team, and McLaren had to, go over to the Honda engine, and that was obviously a disaster. We've still been trying to recover ever since. Now, ironically, they're back with Mercedes power and have, been slowly getting there. They even took a 1-2 at Monza a couple of years ago with Ricciardo and Norris. But they're still consistently, we kind of look at them as the best of the rest, right? We still have the consensus top three teams, and then, McLaren can, certainly flex their muscles here and there and pick up a lot of podiums. I mean, how many podiums is Lando Norris up to now, trying to break through for that win to be on the top step of the podium? If McLaren could just start the year, where they finished the year, then I think that, they could maybe end up breaking into that top three. And if you look at the season that they had last year, after Bahrain, after Saudi Arabia, we were asking, where are these guys? They're one of the worst cars on the grid. And then, as the season progressed, they got better and better. And by the end of it, Oscar Piastri was winning a sprint race, and they were on the podium seemingly every other week. So if McLaren can start the year with that potential, I think you're going to see big, beautiful things for that organization in 2024. But that's a big if. They have to start off on the right foot and set the tone for the season.
I think it is really important for us to realize how far this team has come in the past 5 years. We look at their 2018 car where it was almost just open papaya, no sponsors almost, right? And now I would make a strong argument that, and I don't have any concrete evidence behind this, right? But going off of my closet and going off of where I've been, it feels like more F1 merch has been sold by McLaren, or at least through partnerships with others, than any other team. Ferrari might be close just because there's always been that, obviously with that legacy, but I think genuinely McLaren has really, really become a fan favorite, and that's paid off for them in ways that can benefit them directly, right? So this is a fancy way of me saying I think that Abercrombie and Fitch money is going to help them a lot. And while I don't think they're going to be podium material necessarily, I think we're going to see a pattern, the same pattern we've seen the past 2 years, where maybe they're number 4 and number 5 team. But I'm genuinely convinced that this is the year that we watch McLaren swap with Mercedes for being that number 3 in the big three.
Ferrari might have sold more merch, period, as a company than McLaren, but I think strictly from the F1 department, I think McLaren may very well have them beat, at least here in the United States, because I'm with you, Jackson. I see, there's a kid on my college campus I still want to strike up a conversation with, because I see him in a Lando Norris shirt every week, it seems. So, the proof is in just walking around and seeing the merchandise out there. I'd imagine those numbers have to be very high.
Yep.
Yeah, McLaren, they need to start off fast. If they're not podium contenders, oh boy, I think it just means not only them, but potentially Ferrari and the others are they keeping up with Red Bull? Oh, that's something that's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. Now time for our final prediction. This is where we want everyone share your bold predictions. So, Jackson, what bold predictions do you have?
I was thinking about this earlier. Is it 3? Okay, first of all, is it 3 split among the 3 of us, or are we all giving 3?
You're all giving 3. So go through your 3 bold, and then we'll react to see what happens.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So I was thinking about this with the comments from Ben earlier about how fast this car could be for Red Bull. And I think we could see Checo out of the seat halfway through the season. And hear me out. I think we could basically see early tryouts for this number 2 spot for 2025. And I'm talking Ricciardo gets to drive the Red Bull. Yuki gets to drive the Red Bull. Everybody gets to drive the Red Bull, right? Where if we've really made this car so insanely fast that a monkey can drive it, and we're so locked in for this championship, why not just rotate kids and get Lawson, or why not get Liam laps, right? Why not do that? I think we are going to see I don't think Haas's team principal is going to last this long. I think we're going to get a full-time replacement. Whether that's someone like Offnar Schnauzer or someone else who's been away for a while and coming back, or someone totally new to the sport. I think Gene is going to realize this is not a guy we want at the helm long-term. And lastly, who do I think is going to... I think Albon's going to take that Mercedes seat. I think it's got to be. I think that's going to end his Red Bull revenge arc and fully get him in a top flight team. And he is going to be the next one to keep that team in top form.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in. The Red Bull one, I was going to say... I don't know if it's me reacting or me giving one of mine. I was going to say somebody gets replaced mid-season. I don't think we see all 20 drivers run all 24 races, but I don't know that Checo would have been the one on my list here. But then again, if there's one team that I could see being that ruthless, it's certainly Red Bull Racing. But again, I mean, as long as Checo does the bare minimum, and that is, I think, finishing either second or third and being on the podium, as often as Max is winning, then he's going to take second of a driver's championship again. And I'm sorry, there's just no justification for taking, the second place guy in the driver's standings out of his seat, even if the number one guy is his teammate. So,
okay, but Helmut Marko would totally do that.
Well, that's what I'm saying though. If there's anybody
totally
that would
that.
do it, it would be Helmut Marko. It would be RBR. But there's I don't know, good angels on my shoulder here saying no, not even Red Bull. Not even Red Bull would do that to Checo, right? I mean, as long as Checo doesn't even have to set the world on fire. He just has to be consistent and do everything that he needs to do. And, maybe he even gets to sneak a win out here, once or twice, like he has the last couple of years. I don't know. He's king of the streets. Maybe, a street circuit is a good opportunity for him to do that. But I don't know. That's all I really have to say, Joe. I don't know if you want to respond or if you want me to go into mine.
Checo, I feel he has to be that second and third place guy. He cannot have the weekends where he's just off, making mistakes. And especially if he loses second in the championship, I would say if he's fourth or lower, he might get replaced. That's my thoughts on Checo. And then Haas, I just feel like if they replace their team principal, we're going to be back here again saying, what's going on with Haas? How much more broken can this team be? But it wouldn't surprise me. I don't anticipate anything from Haas. Ben, what are some of your bold predictions?
All right. Number one, I'm going to say I think one of the new entitlement sponsorships that has destroyed the legacy of the team names that they've signed on for will not last through the end of the year. I'm not saying it's going to be a rich energy saga because, of course, Visa is a legitimate company. Of course, Cash App and, at least Stake and Kick, have some, we think, legitimate financial backing to them. But there have already been rumors. I know Josh has been going off in our group chat about the viability of Stake being on the car for every race this year, if that's even legal with the EU laws and everything. And especially with, Audi supposedly coming in, I'm not convinced that livery or that partnership can even last through a full year. So I think one of those two is not going to last. Again, Jackson kind of took this here and gave a specific driver here. One of my predictions was just going to be that somebody gets a mid-season replacement here. Maybe it was going to be one of the drivers that, we were talking about earlier that we were predicting to struggle. We've got a lot of talent. I mean, the last couple F2 champions, still have no home on the grid. Who knows what's going to happen with, Lance Stroll, like you were mentioning, Joe, with the Aston Martin hypercar coming in, and would they want to maybe audition somebody maybe, Jackson, like you were talking about, maybe Mercedes wants to do that and audition someone for that Mercedes seat through the Aston Martin seat, if Lance Stroll doesn't work out, or through, some other means there. So that could be an avenue. I don't know if you want to respond to that.
I just think that's another excellent thing we haven't really thought about. It feels like it's going to be either one of the Sauber, or not one of the Sauber guys, one of the Williams guys, or one of the Aston guys that gets the exit. If it would be Stroll, right? And I think if Mercedes ends up really being in this title fight, I could totally see guys jumping in that 18 car and rotating to apply for that next seat. I could totally see that.
All right. And then my third and final prediction, Williams gets a podium. And selfishly, of course, I hope we see an American flag and it's Logan Sargent. But if I had to venture a guess on the driver, of course, I would more realistically say Alex Albon. And before you think I'm too crazy, before you laugh, again, I don't know how they're going to do it. I'm just saying it's going to happen. George Russell took the Williams to a podium in Spa in 2021. I know that race has a massive asterisk next to it, but it goes down in the record books and it happened. Crazier things have happened in this sport. As Murray Walker always said, anything can happen in this sport, and it usually does. So that's my third and final, and perhaps boldest prediction, is that we see Williams on the podium again.
That is bold. A Williams on the podium. The internet will be buzzing after that, whether it's X, Threads, whatever social media.
That will break the internet.
That could break it.
Debatably more than the Hamilton Ferrari move.
Especially with Logan Sargent. I think that would just, oh my goodness. So that would be really interesting to see. All right. My 3 bold projections. One is very specific. Lando Norris will win the British Grand Prix in Silverstone. I think the McLarens could get it done there. Alpine, with their struggles, and especially going along with Ben's last bold prediction, I think Williams is going to finish ahead of Alpine in the constructors. I think that's going to happen.
That happening.
Yeah. And then this one, I think it's going to really depend on what's going on with the team, with the drivers during the season. But I think we've seen it before. The teammates struggle. Hamilton, George Russell, I think that will continue. I'll get a little bit more evident as we're seeing that George Russell, who has a contract through 2025, Hamilton's on his way out. Russell does not want to be the driver with the least ideal strategy. He wants the best strategy. He does not want to play second fiddle. He wants to bring the team that he's going to be calling home for the next 2 years, where your teammates headed out. Those are 3 of my bold predictions.
Like it. I think you could almost argue the same thing with Ferrari, with Sainz on his way out and how he might be acting, especially with how he might be acting with other teams. But again, I know he's a tenured driver. He's been around, and I think he will 100% find a seat. But how he approaches that this season is going to be really, really. It could go so many ways.
Yeah, I agree. It is very interesting and unusual that, one of these deals has come together with a full season still to run. So I think that dynamic is going to be very interesting. Both of those teams. Joe, remind me, what was the first prediction that you said?
Norris winning the British Grand Prix in Silverstone.
Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about something that would break the internet, especially over in the UK. I think that would be an incredibly popular win. I could see Norris being the Carlos Sainz of 2024, being the one guy that wins a race outside of Red Bull, if Red Bull proved to be as dominant as we're expecting them to be. The British Grand Prix would be an amazing sight to behold, seeing all those fans go crazy for Lando and everything. But I could definitely see Lando being the one to break through. And again, how many times has he been on the podium and been knocking on the door? If it weren't for an ill-timed rainstorm in Russia in 2021, we'd already be talking about him as a race winner. So the talent is there. I think the opportunity is there. It's just a matter of execution.
Execution is going to be key. That's the big thing. In the chat room, as bold prediction, Checo's out mid-season and Liam Lawson will take over. Danny Rick gets a podium. That'll be something for the V-Carb to be on the podium. And Alonso takes Mercedes in 2025. Be really interesting to see.
Hey,
what
if
happens.
anyone could get that car on the podium, I know I was just trying to defend Sonoda, but Daniel Rick is the king of getting cars that should not be on the podium. So I totally see this happening. I'm so for it.
It'll be really interesting to see. And that leads us to our final question. We encourage everyone to chat and participate because it's the last one. I think it's safe to say we're all predicting Red Bull and Max Verstappen to be first in drivers and constructors. So now, starting with you, Ben, who's going to be second in the drivers and the constructors standing?
I'm going to go with Checo. You know, he had a down year in the minds of a lot of people last year and still finished second because of how dominant the Red Bull is. And I don't see that changing. So I think Sergio Perez will be your second place driver in the driver standings. And in the constructor standings, you know, again, I know it's the boring pick, you know, to take, you know, the same result as last year and there not be a lot of parity. But again, you know, all we heard about last year was how awful the Mercedes was, how terrible it was to drive, how much Lewis Hamilton and George Russell were frustrated by it. And they still, at the very end, edged out Ferrari for second in the constructors. I think Mercedes is going to do that again.
Wow. Okay, because I got like the exact opposite because I'm saying Checo literally implodes under the pressure and drops
to be fair,
to maybe third or fourth.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, if you're predicting that he's going to be replaced mid-season, I hope that he's not your second place finisher in the driver standings, because that would be very hard to do. I think to be replaced mid-year and still hold on. I mean,
if this works out, right? What's going? Where I'm seeing this going, we see Checo really, really struggling, falling to fourth or fifth, or further back in the championship. I would say. Oh man, I want to say Leclerc, but ultimately, as much as I want to see Sainz really like beating Leclerc in the championship on the way out, I really do think it's going to be Leclerc. But I would pretty safely lock in Ferrari for second.
Oh man, Ferrari for second. I mean, they almost got it done at Abu Dhabi, or Mercedes wasn't to be.
The only reason I say that is because, again, I really think this is where McLaren steps up, and I think Mercedes is going to spend a lot of time, not necessarily digging into Ferrari, but probably kicking back the papaya guys.
That's really interesting because I'm a little bit different than all of you guys. I'm thinking second place in the constructors, and essentially the best of the rest battle is going to be for second and beyond. I think it's going to be McLaren. I think Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris are going to have good, solid seasons. The Ferraris, as much as they'll improve, I think there's going to be mistakes here and there. I think at times Mercedes looks faster. The engine, at least the Mercedes team itself, I just don't know where that team is going to stack up. So I think McLaren will get second in the constructors, and that'll be huge. I anticipate for sure at least one Lando Norris victory, Oscar Piastri podiums more frequently, potential victory. We'll see. But yeah, for the driver standing, this is where I feel it's going to be a lot more competitive because I think it's going to be really the best of the rest. And that one, I think, again, just because the way the team has improved, they were looking so good, they have to be much better. It has to be Lando Norris. If he is not top three in the standings, I think people are going to be saying, is he really the real deal? So that's going to be my prediction for second place.
I'd love to see it. Again, you know, with how unreliable McLaren can be at the start of the year, I don't know if they can overtake Mercedes and Ferrari just yet, but that is a bold prediction and one that I would certainly like to see.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And of course, that's all coming up this upcoming weekend. Adam, Leclerc and Mercedes, second place. And of course, we encourage everyone, subscribe to us so you don't miss our pre-race show for Formula One. We got a lot of programming coming up. We have Grid Tonight tomorrow, the Women in Motorsports, Grid Live pre-race. And then, of course, we're going to recap the Formula One and NASCAR Cup Series race weekend. And don't forget, pick a winner. And since we've been talking about F1, that means pick 7th place is going to be back for F1 because we just know pick a winner. I think everyone's going to go with Max. So pick 7th place, make it fun. We'll have a separate leaderboard and prizes for the winners in pick 7th place for Formula One. And a big thank you to our Patreon subscribers calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network. Without them, we couldn't be on the air. They help us pay the bills. If you want to do a super chat, well, thank you on the air as well, too. And you get your name on the leaderboard so you can overtake Jason, the leader. And once again, subscribe, hit the bell icon, like, and comment on all our videos. Check out some of our past Life on the Grid videos and roundtables as well. For Jackson Lambros and Ben Schneider, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.